if you start making a good money, let's just say, like I said right at the beginning of this, if you're making $300,000 a year, right? When you're making that kind of money, you can rationalize putting things on the credit card because you're like, well, I make 300 grand, I'll easily be able to pay this off. Then the problem is that when it comes to the end of the month, you don't pay it all off. You'll maybe only pay off a portion, like a small amount, but then you do the same thing again the next month, where you put it on there thinking I can pay it off and make a lot of money. I bet it sort of snowballs, but in like the opposite, instead of snowballing like Dave Ramsey style to get rid of the debt, it snowballs the complete opposite, where bit by bit by bit by bit, this thing just expands. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, I make 300 grand a year and I can't afford to pay off this credit card debt, you know? Does that make sense? How you doing, everyone? So I saw a bit of this video the other day and I just wanted to watch and check it out. Why even high earners are living paycheck to paycheck.
For many Americans, work can feel like a hamster wheel. No matter how hard they run, it never feels like enough. Americans, on average, say they would need $520,000 a year to feel rich. And
that's quite a lot of money. You need to make that much a year? Okay.
The more people earn, the more they say they need to feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's called lifestyle creep. The more cash you have in your pocket, the more you want to spend it.
Americans making under $50,000 felt they needed $157,000 a year to feel comfortable. Those making $100,000 or more said they would need $246,000.
When I was in middle school, a song came out called Mo Money, Mo Problems. And I think that that's true. Your problems scale. You still are dealing with a finite number every month. Your worries, your anxiety, your budget scales to that. You still are dealing with a ceiling.
About 14.
Well, no, it's because like instead of eating, instead of like cooking from home, like maybe you would do, or ordering from a takeout place, which is quite cheaper, you'd probably find yourself, hanging around with people who go to fancy restaurants as opposed to eating in, or maybe as opposed to renting a small flat on the edge of town, you'd end up renting like a fancy apartment in the middle of downtown or something like that. That's what's happening. It's not magically like money just leaves your account. You're making choices to spend way more money.
10% of all U.S. households make $200,000 or more every year. But many of them, dubbed Henrys or high earners, not rich yet, still don't feel rich. 62% of people with salaries over $300,000 a year struggle with credit card debt.
Struggle? That's actually nuts. Like, I'm not even being funny. That's nuts. 62% of Americans making $300,000 a year or more have struggle with credit card debt. Do you really know how much debt you'd have to? That's nuts. Like, you really don't have much of an excuse. Not with credit card debt anyway. I mean, with a mortgage and like a car payment, I could understand. Or maybe some other HELOC. But credit card debt? That's wild. That really is wild.
Earning doesn't actually make you feel rich, spending it does. If most people spent 99% of their paycheck, they'd feel quite rich. And it's the paradox here, when we're in accumulation mode, it's very difficult to feel rich.
It can be pretty easy for someone to feel like I'm making really good money, but I don't have a lot of discretionary income.
Earning more.
Well, yeah, because you're spending it. Like, that's the thing. You're spending it all. You're taking out debt. You're maxing yourself out. I mean, I can understand, and if you're like a working class person and you have credit card debt and stuff, it sucks. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation to be in, but I can understand it. If you're making like $300,000 a year plus and you're struggling with credit card debt, at some point it's like, okay, you really have to look at your finances because you have you're making the money. You have the firepower to get rid of this. You're just making some dumb choices.
Feeling like you're still on a hamster wheel is what a lot of Henrys experience. And that's because they're not living within their means. They may have been living above their means when they weren't nearly making as much money, and now they're just continuing to add more and more and more.
I earn $300,000 and I live in New York City. I definitely don't feel rich. I feel very lucky, I feel privileged, but I do not feel rich. I could not stop working right now.
Well, yeah, 300 grand, if you're like actually in Manhattan, depending on where you are, like 300 grand is not a lot of money.
Calendar year of 2025, we're just on track to make 1.4 million. We're hoping to get to 1.5 or possibly even 1.6. I'm anticipating my owner's draw to be anywhere between 300,000 and 400,000. Had a pretty successful career as a musician through most of my 20s. The thing they don't tell you about having a career as a musician in music school is that you can be playing Carnegie Hall, which I was, and I was making $15,000 a year. And
God damn. Arts is a lot, most of it's about marketing. Like, you could be a very skilled musician, but if you can't market yourself, if you can't get yourself out there, if you can't monetize the bums in the seats or the eyes watching or the ears listening, you can have nothing.
A lot of the high earners, not rich yet, they're first generation wealth. So they still take their wealth into perspective against their family members or others in their community, and they realize how well they're doing. So they don't take it for granted. But I think what makes them feel not rich is we were told once you make six figures, all of your problems will go away. You'll just have so much excess. And I think we know that narrative is not true anymore.
Well, six figures, if you have like a relatively simple life, but like if you get up into the mids or the highs, like for sure, like you could, especially if you live in a place like Manhattan, you know, you could absolutely max out.
I know that I am on a hamster wheel with my business. I actually really love the hamster wheel. I love what I do, but I also realize that I can't stop.
So Henrys often don't feel rich compared to others. They work very hard for their money, but they also spend a lot more than the average person.
In a lot of ways, Henrys may be victims of their zip codes.
$100,000 in LA is definitely very different than $100,000 in Iowa. Someone makes $200,000 a year in LA. They're going to probably take home $140-ish. Rent for a one bedroom is going to be at least $3,000. Their car payment's going to be $700. Car insurance is going to be maybe $200 a month. Gas is going to be $200.
LA is expensive. I mean, tax itself just takes a massive chunk right out of you.
A month. If you were to annualize that, that's $50,000 right there. The remainder is for all the other things. We haven't eaten yet. We haven't purchased groceries. We haven't paid for subscriptions to Amazon and Netflix. We haven't gone on vacation yet. We haven't purchased clothes yet. It can whittle away your discretionary income if you're living in an area that has a high cost of living.
When my business started to grow, one of the first things that I started spending more money on.
Oh, hang on. Let me guess. Well, you've moved apartment, so that's one of them. That's a big one. And, well, I'm just saying it because it is a major thing that always changes what you eat, your food habits. Because you go from eating, probably cooking at home more to probably more takeouts and more restaurants.
Right away was food, because I don't have time to cook. I had more money than time, and so I started eating Grubhub 3 meals a day most days. After that, it became rent, because I hit $1 million a year in revenue, and I said, that's it, I'm moving to Manhattan. And so
Well, yeah, I've said it before, and I feel like a broken record. If your spending goes up, and you think to yourself, oh, I've got $1 million in revenue, so I'm going to move into a nice apartment in Manhattan. It's like, okay, well, no wonder you're yeah, I get it. I mean, I'd probably do the same thing, but that's where your money's going.
Rent doubled.
It's not going into your business. You know, it's not working for you. It's not going into investments. It's literally just like a chosen discretionary spend. Well, not discretionary, but actually it kind of is a discretionary. Because it's not like you can't afford a place to live. You're choosing something that's more expensive. And because you work from home, you could work wherever you wanted to work. So you're choosing to work somewhere that's more expensive. Like, you know, it's not like a necessity to live in that apartment. You could live somewhere cheaper if you really, really wanted to. You know.
And I suddenly was paying $4,000 in rent. What is very worth it to me is to live where I want to live. I was proud that I could live here. For about a year, I would walk outside my apartment and just like look around and just be like, oh my gosh, here I am. So that was lifestyle creep for me.
Yep.
Lifestyle creep is the common phenomenon of spending a little more money as you earn more. It can happen to anyone at any income.
Yeah, every time you get a pay rise, you just spend the money. You know, it happened to me at one point. It's pretty nuts. And a lot of this is also to do with the people you're hanging around with, because as your income goes up, you'll be spending time around people who also make a similar income, especially at the business you're working, and you'll just inevitably find yourself, you know, going with that crowd, hanging around with those people, spending that cash.
Lifestyle creep can really sneak up on you. You start earning more and then you decide, well, I can buy more things. I need a second car. I need a bigger home. I need to go on this European vacation. I deserve this European vacation because I work hard for my money.
Well, it's also like a lot of it's where a lot of the debt comes from too, as well. Honest truth be told, now that I'm thinking about it, because it's like the best way I think about it is this: if you start making a good money, let's just say, like I said right at the beginning of this, if you're making $300,000 a year, right? When you're making that kind of money, you can rationalize putting things on the credit card because you're like, well, I make 300 grand, I'll easily be able to pay this off. The problem is that when it comes to the end of the month, you don't pay it all off. You'll maybe only pay off a portion, like a small amount, but then you do the same thing again the next month, where you put it on there thinking I can pay it off and make a lot of money. And then it sort of snowballs, but in like the opposite, instead of snowballing like Dave Ramsey style to get rid of the debt, it snowballs the complete opposite, where bit by bit by bit by bit, this thing just expands. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, I make 300 grand a year and I can't afford to pay off this credit card debt, you know? Does that make sense? So it's not just lifestyle creep, it's debt creep too, you know. Things like, or gaining weight, like things can creep up on you real quick if you're not paying attention.
Problem is, if you're not continuing to increase your savings at the same time, you are putting your financial future in jeopardy.
That shift happens everywhere in our lives, from the small purchases to the really big ones.
Yep.
Cars, houses, vacation, and most of these expenses are fixed.
Lifestyle creep impacts almost all tax brackets, but it can take different forms. One 2024 study found that when low and middle income households were given an additional $1,000, no strings attached, every month, their spending increased primarily on basic necessities, such as food, transportation, and rent. However,
Well, yeah, because if you're low income or middle income, like those are the types of things you'd normally have to focus on anyway. Whereas if you're a high income, you can spend more, your basic needs have already sort of been met. And so you can spend that extra $1,000 on, like, you know, takeouts, restaurants, entertainment, trips, bars, you know, strip clubs, all that kind of stuff.
higher income households were given the same $1,000, they increased spending on both necessities as well as discretionary expenses.
Yeah, because like I said, if you're a high earner, your necessities have already been met. You've met those. That's done. You're good. You can make your groceries. You can make your rent or mortgage. What you're going to spend it on is fun. Because especially if you haven't earned it, it's like if you're $1,000. Oh, cool. Well, in that case, I'm going to go spend, you know, a week in Rome or a week in, I don't know, Miami. Well, not Miami. You couldn't afford it, but you get what I mean?
Marie did.
I spend more on my hair. I spend more on makeup. I get my lashes done. I get my nails done. I think it's just something that comes with the territory.
Birds of a feather tend to flock together and their spending tends to be more aligned. If you make about $85,000, your friends probably also make about $85,000.
Right,
so you're doing similar
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
activities in the same economic bracket. Once you have friends that are making $200,000-$300,000 a year, your activities will change. The restaurants that you will eat at will differ and change. They're going to probably be a little bit more elevated. Your vacations are going to be more elevated. Your clothing is going to be more elevated. It's not necessarily spending irresponsibly, but they're spending aligned with their friend group and their community. That's why a lot of them oftentimes don't feel.
What is it called? Keeping up with the Joneses? That's more the suburban thing, but I guess you could say that for here too. It's like if your next door neighbor goes and buys a fancy new car and you want to go out and buy a fancy new car as well. But in all honesty, man, that's the economy. That's how it works. You know, it's idiots trying to outspend other idiots. That's basically all it is. You know, people trying to convince other people to buy crap from them. That's economics 101.
Rich because they're spending along with their friends.
Emotions are tied so tightly to what we do with our money. It happens to everyone. You get a raise, you're feeling great, you deserve to go out to dinner. In fact, you deserve to book that cruise. But the reality is that money was supposed to be earmarked for a bump up in your retirement savings, or money that you were going to put toward your child's education, or maybe you don't have an emergency fund, or at least not an adequate one, and the money should have gone there.
That is something I wish I'd focused on more when I was younger. Was investments and stuff. I do it a lot now, you know, but way back when, I just didn't really think of it. I think it's a working class, definitely a working class British thing. Especially when I was growing up, it was something you never thought about it. You never even considered it, you know. Things have changed a bit now, though, but There we go.
Allow ourselves to let our emotions overtake what we're doing with our money, we lose sight sometimes of what our goals are and how we have planned to meet them.
A Henry will sometimes look to the mega millionaires or the billionaires and wish that they had more, but it's really just that upwards comparison for more that keeps them stuck. More will never be enough at a certain point, and you have to decide what you have is ultimately enough and start appreciating all that you do have instead of fixating on all that you don't.
I've never really valued stuff. I mean, at some point in my life, I just realized, like, I could spend, 10, 20 grand or whatever on like a new toy. And within a few weeks, it's not that I get bored of it, it just became my new normal. And as soon as I clocked onto that, I kind of realized, I much prefer, experiences to stuff. Like, I'd rather go and spend, a few weeks abroad in a country that I haven't seen before and have that, emotional and have that memory, as opposed to, oh, I've just bought this thing.
Experts say the best way for Henrys to start to feel rich and to get off the hamster wheel is by budgeting and planning for the future.
You can't really figure out if you're rich yet unless you know where you stand right now and where you want to go. You need to know your net worth. Doesn't matter how much money you have. It's not just for rich people. You have a net worth. What you own minus what you owe is your net worth. Everyone has one. Yours may be negative at this point, but you have to figure how to turn that around. Once you know your net worth, then you can start to build on what are your goals? What do I want to have in terms of my retirement savings, in terms of savings for college if you have children, in terms of emergency savings in case anything happens, how secure will I be? Once you have significant emergency savings, enough to cover, say, 6 months of your expenses or more, you're going to start to feel rich. Surveys have shown.
Okay, I don't know anyone, literally anyone, who has 6 months worth of like savings in an emergency fund. I really don't. I personally, I think that amount is completely unnecessary. Like, maybe a couple of months and you're fine. Because, like, especially if you're living somewhere like here or like in Europe, where you've obviously got like a welfare state that can help you. But 6 months in an emergency fund is way too much. I mean, you're actively losing money to inflation if you just have it in an emergency fund. I'd be investing that. I really would. I'd be putting as much of that as I could into the market, so at least I'm getting a return.
Shown that financial well-being is tied closely to emergency saving. And so if you know that you're not going to have to whip out a credit card, that you're going to be able to pay for the roof that needs to be fixed or the car that breaks down, you're going to feel rich.
People, yeah, I've heard that said before. I mean, once you hit a certain point of income and you have a certain net worth and you can see a certain number, you do start to feel a lot more relaxed and a lot more comfortable. Mainly because, like you said, I mean, I think the thing that screws most sort of poor working class people or working poor people, it isn't like, how's the best way I can phrase it? It's not that the world's against you. It's more just it takes so little. It doesn't take as much to knock you down. Does that make sense? Like, if you get up one day and you have like a engine an engine fault light pop up on your car, or a burst tire, or the boiler breaks, or there's a pipe bursts. Like, these are major things. Like, if it's just a few $100 here or there, that's a lot. That could be basically like your groceries for the month. And then you're like, okay, great. So now I have to choose between getting the boiler fixed and, it's the end of fall and we're getting into winter. And you're like, okay, great. It's going to be freezing. I need to get this thing done. And that's all my money gone for the month. It's those kind of things that really kind of, mess you up. Like, once you've reached the point where you're no longer tied down by that and you're going to be okay. Like, if something happens, it's going to suck, but it's not going to destroy you. It's not going to damage you. You're still going to be able to, get things done, go to work, pay for groceries, pay for bills. You don't have to put it on the credit card. You start to feel a bit better and a bit more secure about yourself. I 100% agree with that.
I think wealth is often an emotional feeling. It's a mindset to feel truly secure and not to have to worry about finances at all. Feeling rich, it can feel much more about the bottom line and the dollar amount. So one is more about the tangible number in your bank account, and the other more is a feeling. Most people aspire to reach a level of wealth where they don't have to stress or worry about their finances or even about the future generations, to know that there's a cushion there.
One of the things I focus on with my clients is a budget should be a representation of your values. The issue is you can't value everything. You have to prioritize it. And when people see the hard numbers of what they're spending on a monthly or annualized basis.
This is so true. Excuse me. I used to work, before I got the career I have now, I used to work for a company where we basically did debt management for people. And people who were just, to borrow a word, screwed or, fucked. People in that situation, it was like, it was kind of like I was sort of saying before, where if a bill came through, they put it on the credit card, and then they'd just be like, it's okay, we'll pay it off. And then something else would happen, they'd put that on the credit card. And there was always this mentality of, look, we could put it on the credit card, and then we'll worry about it next time. And the next thing they know, they're just swamped with debt, and they can't afford to pay it. And a lot of the times what I found is that when you actually, these people call in, and my job would basically be to go through their financial situation, check all their numbers, provide financial advice as best as I can. For a lot of people, when you actually went and went through their financial statements, it was like the first time they really recognized, that's how much I make, and oh Christ, that's how much debt I'm in. It only dawns on them then, oh my God, I spend this much a year or this much a month on booze. Or, oh my God, I spent this much on gambling. Or I spent this much on this and didn't realize. And it's kind of funny how once you realize where the issue is, and once you realize what the issue is, then you can start making steps to actually do something about it. And I've always believed that. I really, really, really do believe that. It's fundamentally important.
And they see, oh my gosh, I'm spending $5,000 a year eating out. I will ask the question, are you enjoying those meals at $5,000? Is it bringing you that much excitement and that much joy? And most people will say, no, Camila, it's not. The food is okay. I'm doing it to be social. Well, we'll talk about other ways that you can be social without spending $5,000 a year eating out. You can't buy clothes consistently, travel consistently, eat out consistently. You have to pick maybe one or two things where you're going to focus your discretionary spending and then take that extra and reroute that to savings. Well,
hardcore gambling gives me joy, so I'm going to continue to do that. Thank you very much. If we're talking about values, that's what I value. Ain't no way I'm giving up the blackjack table.
You can start feeling rich.
Spending gives this immediate dopamine fix, and seeing wealth in an account with numbers and commas often can be far more satisfying, though we don't realize it in the moment. It's almost like the difference between an exciting, yet very toxic relationship versus a secure and stable long-term partner.
Well, no, because one's exciting and one's boring. That's basically what she's trying to say. It's like, why be boring when you can live an exciting life on the edge? Just throw it onto a meme coin. You know what I mean? Just chuck it all into there. Max out your credit card and put it all into Trump coin, and watch that bad boy go to the moon.
I think the feeling of safety and the feeling that you can weather this long-term financial storm is far more satisfying, and we have to train ourselves to value that safety over the quick fix of a fancy car or a shiny new watch.
My advice for somebody who's on the hamster wheel is understanding the trade-off. I could get off the hamster wheel at any time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about you before. It's a choice. You chose to do it. You don't need to be where you are for work. She could literally do this job from anywhere. As long as she has an internet connection and a desk and a laptop, she's sorted. You know what I'm saying? So she's choosing this. She could. It's not even downgrading. You could find a big, decent, nice house that just isn't in the middle of Manhattan. There's nothing, you could easily do that. And you could probably cook more and make it super delicious. You don't have to get takeouts all the time. I hate to be that guy. The reason why you're poor is because you're eating too many avocados and toast. But in this particular case, that is 100% why you're on the wheel. That is 100% why.
And I know that. And I know that my circumstances may change. For right now, this is the answer for me. My advice to somebody who's
Yet nothing annoys me more, because working poor people, it's I have a lot of sympathy for that. But if you're middle class and you're pretending that you're like a baller, like, no, you're not. Like, yeah, like you could in a few years be in a really amazing spot and making some serious money. But if you're throwing it all away like that, it's like, nah. Middle class people who pretend to be upper class people or wealthy baller people is like, they're the most annoying. They really, really are.
That anxiety is understand that this is a choice. There are trade-offs. What I have learned is that I have been very burnt out and exhausted as a person who doesn't earn a lot of money. And I have been burned out and exhausted as a person who does earn a lot of money. And I would take being a person who's burned out and exhausted and has money.
Isn't that the speech from blooming Wolf of Wall Street?
There is no nobility in poverty. I have been a rich man and I have been a poor man, and I choose rich every fucking time.